Start, bench, cut these 3 Penn State running backs in college. Can you tell me who Penn State football is playing this weekend?
Sorry, what?
Welcome back into the Penn State Pulse. I'm your host, Dylan Dawson. Hell of an opening game from the boys as they topped West Virginia in Morgantown by the score of 34-12. Let's get right into it with a few things that stood out to me. First thing up, a matured Drew Allar. Drew looked poised, he looked in control, and he was very aggressive on Saturday. He made some NFL throws, he ran some guys over, and he talked a little shit in between. He only threw 17 passes on the day, but that's all they needed from him. I've discussed this before. Andy Kotelnicki isn't going to go away from what's working. Drew did complete 11 of those 17 pass attempts for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns, and once again, another 0 turnover game from QB1. Both Drew and the offense still need to show that they can take things up a notch against those elite defenses, but they handled business against West Virginia and did exactly what they were supposed to do, and then some. We'll make that judgment when the time comes, but so far, so good from Drew Allar and that Penn State offense. Next up, Trey Wallace, breakout. I've been saying it all offseason. Some of you took my word for it, some didn't, and now probably will in the future, hopefully will in the future. But I'll say it again now that we're a game into the season with some evidence to back it up. Trey Wallace is the 2024 Penn State football team's wide receiver 1. 5 catches, 117 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day for Trey, all coming in the first half of that football game. He probably could have padded the stats a bit, but PSU threw it like 3 times in the entire second half. They just didn't really need to. That second half was more about milking the clock, leaning on West Virginia, and getting out of there with no injuries, which they did, 3 for 3. Back to Wallace, though, you saw the top-end speed on that 50-yard touchdown catch down the seam, and then his ball skills and athleticism on the second touchdown catch right before halftime. That drive was awesome, by the way. We've seen in years past where Penn State just kind of kneels in that situation. They had the ball on their own 20 with like 20 seconds left after the run to start the drive, and then AK opts to chuck it deep to Amari Evans, who makes a play on the ball, maybe a little push off, and then next play, an absolute rope from Drew Allar to Trey. Back shoulder throw in the corner of the end zone. Just beautiful ball, beautiful catch. Didn't really have it last year, so that was very encouraging to see. It's all there for Trey Wallace, and we finally saw it on display against the Mountaineers. Next is Phil Trautwein's O-line. The final point I'm going to hit on for the offense is this offensive line. If you talked to me at all before the game, you'd probably know that I wasn't expecting a super clean game from this group right off the bat. But that's pretty much exactly what they gave us, was a super clean game. I was expecting maybe 4 or 5 sacks given up just because it's game 1. They need to figure their stuff out, get the blocking schemes down, communicate. But everything went really well. Penn State went for 222 yards on the ground at 5.3 yards a pop, and Drew Allar was not sacked once. Now, West Virginia isn't an elite defense. They don't have an elite front, but they have some dudes. To do that on the road in game 1 is impressive. Hats off to Phil Trautwein, and hats off to that O-line unit. Big day from Jaylen Reed and the safeties. Moving on to the defense, you can't discuss this game without mentioning Penn State's safety play, and Jaylen Reed in particular. This unit is very deep this season, and the 4-2-5 is just an absolutely perfect way to showcase that. Jaylen Reed in particular got a ton of snaps in that new line position where he was just flying all over the field. Reed finished with 9 total tackles, 2 passes defensed, 1 fumble recovery, 1 tackle for loss, and a handful of big hits. He's always been great playing down in the box. I believe he did it a bunch in high school at MLK High out there in Detroit. So this really is a perfect marriage between Reed and that line position and Tom Allen's defense. So Reed's 9 tackles were actually second on the team for the game, and first with 12 total, you guessed it, was indeed another safety, KJ Winston Jr., who also handed out a few boomsticks himself, finished with 12 tackles and a forced fumble of his own. Just a huge game from the safeties. Next up, the big guys up front on defense. So I went 1 for 3 on my pregame predictions, and the one I did hit on was the Penn State holding West Virginia under 100 total rush yards. So that front seven saved me from striking out on those predictions. So hat tip and thank you to the big fellas. West Virginia tried PSU with 37 rushing attempts, but only averaged 2.3 yards a clip for 85 total yards on the ground. Zane Durant, Tony Rojas, Alonzo Ford, and we'll go Smith Vilbert. That's all guys that really stood out to me as well, and there's more, but I can't really highlight every guy on the defense. It was just kind of one of those games where everyone had a day. I just really liked what I saw from the defense as a whole. I think this transition from Manny Diaz to Tom Allen could actually look pretty seamless on the field this year, which is saying a lot. Moving on, I want to talk about a few areas for improvement for Penn State. So I did say before the game that I expected it to be a bit sloppy for both teams, which it was for about one quarter. Then PSU started to figure things out and just left West Virginia in the dust. But regardless, even though it was only game one, and some of these things are a given for every team, there are spots that Penn State needs to clean up by the time they're playing teams like Wisconsin, USC, and Ohio State. So the biggest problem that I think could bite PSU down the line, if not fixed, is the field goal kicking. Sanders Sahadak was the starter to open the season, and he hooked his one attempt on the day wide right on a 46-yarder, I believe it was. He had the power. That's never been an issue with him, his kicking power. He didn't have the accuracy, which is where Sander has struggled. If you can remember back to the West Virginia game last season, he went 0 for 2 in the first half of that one on field goals before he was pulled for Alex Felkins, who ended up holding on to the starting job and making a pretty good season out of it. Sahadak, had his chance at redemption last Saturday, and he unfortunately failed to take advantage yet again. He did go 4 for 4 on extra points, but just that is not going to cut it in close games where you kind of just need every point you can get. I stated earlier in the offseason, that I thought walk-on Ryan Barker could possibly win the job, and he didn't even dress against West Virginia, so I'm not sure if there's an injury or what's up with that, but I will update y'all when I can. Bottom line though, I'm not sure Sahadak is the guy for that kicking job right now, and that needs to be settled ASAP. Next up, how deep can the wide receivers go? The next thing I want to address is that exactly, and I'm not referring to their route running. We saw Trey Wallace go over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. Amari Evans had a nice day with 2 catches for 55 yards. But outside of those two guys, not a single PSU wide receiver recorded a catch. So I want to know, how deep can that wide receiver room actually go? Now, I wouldn't label this a problem just yet. It's just something I'll be monitoring over the next few weeks. Penn State passed the ball 17 times all game. I think it's more of a matter of they just didn't have to air it out much. Liam Clifford played a lot less than I expected, and I did hear some rumblings of him being a bit banged up, which would make sense. But a healthy Liam Clifford will be more involved. So will guys like Julian Fleming, Tyser Denmark, Caden Saunders, maybe Ivy and Johnson. I want to see it on the field though, so not officially an issue yet, but wide receiver depth, keep an eye on it. Finally, I wanted to hit on the interior run blocking. I'm probably confusing a few of y'all because I was just praising the offensive line. I do think they had an awesome game overall, but this is the area where they left me wanting more. Singleton was able to break a few of those long runs up the middle, but outside of that, PSU didn't have much success at all running between the tackles. I wanted to see them generate more push in the middle, and it just never really came to fruition all game. Again, though, let me reiterate this. Penn State's offensive line from top to bottom is ahead of where I thought they'd be right now by a considerable margin. All right, let's wrap things up. I really don't have any complaints overall. That was an awesome way to start the season, and I'm so glad I made the trip. I got to meet a ton of you guys. Shout out to the weather delay for making a lot of those interactions a possibility. Next up for Penn State is the Lions' home opener this Saturday as Bowling Green comes to Happy Valley. PSU opened as 31.5-point favorites on FanDuel. I think that's a little low. I already threw some money on that. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let's keep the wins rolling. This has been the Penn State Pulse with Dylan Dawson.